And while it's so important to dive deep into those serious conversations, it's also crucial that we celebrate Indigenous culture. Sage and Lesley both do that through fashion, and they are sticking around now to chat about it. Okay, Sage, let's start with you. You co-founded Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto, and you're the artistic director. When I was reading up on Indigenous Fashion Week, the mission statement says you challenge mainstream perceptions of Indigenous people and culture. And I would love for you to expand on that a bit more for our viewers.
Yeah, Indigenous people, Indigenous cultures have been displayed by mainstream media in fashion, in film, in art in a very stereotypical way. Most people will probably think of headdresses, prairie style Indians, like with feathers and fringe. And in our culture, especially in fashion, there's actually hundreds of Indigenous nations that are living today. We have a living, breathing culture, and I think it's very important to show who we are today. And it is not that stereotype that a lot of people see often.
Lesley, you have your own fashion label, and your work not only pays homage to your roots, but it's infused with representation and activism. So can you tell us more about how you see and use fashion as a tool?
Yeah, so I use my fashion design to learn about myself, learn about my roots, and really learn about my identity. Being a 25-year-old and starting this brand just a few years ago, I really use each collection to discover a new part of myself, whether it's having to do with body positivity or mental health awareness, or discovering my indigeneity. So I do hope that my collections as a whole educate other people my age and have them explore their identity as well.
And just as an example of that, like the history and the fashion coming together, you've got a collection called 1876. And why is it called 1876?
Yeah, so that's the year the Indian Act was put into place in Canada. And it is the Indian Act, through a few different variations, is still an active piece of legislature. So I think people understanding what the Indian Act means, why Indigenous people have the Indian status card, I think is a great way of educating the public on Indigenous issues, and will only push our society forward.
Sage, you recently oversaw a capsule collaboration between IFWTO and the store Simons, which is a big deal. And I want to know, as we look at some of the pieces, because we've got some shots of them, the significance of a collaboration like this, what does this represent and why is this a big deal?
Yeah, it was very exciting. I actually met the buyer, Océane, at a panel discussion about the future of Canadian fashion, which was a very exciting place to be able to meet her and for us to mutually agree on our values around what we wanted to see in the fashion industry. We wanted to see more sustainability and more diversity. And of course, for me as an Indigenous woman and leading Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto, it's really important for me to see Indigenous representation in mainstream fashion. So through this collection, we were able to bring Indigenous fashion to a mainstream market, so people are able to understand where we come from, the hundreds of nations, the vibrancy, and just how beautiful the work is and the meaning behind it. Just like Lesley was saying, all of the clothing, there's a lot of meaning towards, where someone comes from. It's self-expression, it's artistic expression. So it was just really important for us to be able to provide that platform where a group of Indigenous artists, 8 Indigenous artists, had that space to share that with a very broad audience.
Yeah, the space to share it, and also the opportunity to get people to start thinking more about how they buy fashion and where fashion comes from and the history of this country. So I think what you're doing, Sage, is amazing. And Lesley, we know you're doing amazing as well. Your work has been seen on some major red carpets, and it's been featured in Vogue. Miss Kim Kardashian has posted about you on her social media account. You've been called one of Canada's most exciting designers, which is so amazing. So what to you would be the ultimate marker of success for you in your career?
I hope that I can continue to break down stereotypes and barriers so that new talent can thrive, new Indigenous talent and just emerging talent as a whole. I think it'll be an exciting time when diversity isn't a trending topic, but when diversity is instilled within the core foundation of every brand that is put out there. We've gone viral a number of times, which is why Kim Kardashian picked us up, for including all body types, skin tones, abilities, and ages. So I think fashion will be really exciting when we can move to the next step from what's beyond that.
Absolutely. There's so much talk these days about allyship, and I'd love to throw this out to both of you, but what does that look like? Like how is supporting Indigenous fashion designers and brands such a powerful form of allyship? And I'll give this one to Sage.
Really been thinking about this a lot lately. It's just coming up everywhere, and for very good reasons. It's so important that we discuss this. But when it comes to allyship, it's really about understanding that there are already communities doing really incredible, innovative things. Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto happens as a fashion week, but we actually operate very differently from a standard fashion week, where we actually pay our designers artist fees out of gratitude and honor of the work that we are able to present on our platform. And I think that work that we're doing through Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto, people are noticing. For example, we were able to partner with Simons in a way that allowed Indigenous artists not just to have that visible support as another Indigenous face in a marketing campaign, but a true partnership in how we work together. So when I see allyship, like Lesley was saying, it's like that diversity is at the core, and we're all sharing the processes of how we work together. It's just not about putting Indigenous faces as a spotlight in, whatever project we're working on.
Yeah, I just had this conversation with my husband a couple of days ago, because it's not just about getting the faces out there and having window dressing. No, this is about real change. Like, how are we doing things differently? Are we just jumping into a structure that has already been created? Or are we changing the structure? And so I love that you said that, Sage. And I want to give Lesley an opportunity to talk about any other favorite designers that you have out there that you can put out there right now on Cityline that we should have on our radar. Anyone you think that we should be looking at in terms of fashion that are faves of yours?
There's so many designers that I would love to highlight. A few of my favorites would be Indie City, Helen Oro Designs, Mobilize, Urban Native Era, Tanya Larson. Even Sage's work is incredible as well. There's so many Indigenous talents out there, and Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto is a great way to discover those talents and see what Canada can offer.
Thank you so much for putting all of those names on the radar. Congratulations to both of you, and keep going. That's all I can say is you're making a difference. You're making a change for sure. So thank you, Sage. Thank you, Lesley.